The Futai no Kiwami. I cannot tell you guys how many times throughout my entire youth I attempted to learn the mastery of two layers, because this episode of Rurouni Kenshin, just like in the 90s version, just like in the manga, it's explained so simplistically that it really makes you feel like you can do it. I cannot tell you how many rocks, how many trees, how many just various items in the world, thankfully no people, I think, that I have attempted to do the mastery of two layers, which I call the Futai no Kiwami because that's how it was pronounced in the old anime, so that's how I know it. But whatever terminology you want to go with, you know, I tried over and over and over and over again, and you know what? Unashamed, I still try it sometimes to this day. Every once in a while, I got this big tree stump outside, you know, and I've been like hitting it with the axe. I'm like trying to get rid of it slowly but surely. I'm not, you know, it's kind of one of those casual things where it's like, I'll get rid of it eventually. But sometimes I go outside, swing the axe at it just for fun. But I also attempt to do the Futai no Kiwami on this tree stump all the time. All right, so what episode number is this? I don't even know. I can't remember. But this is the episode where Sanosuke gets his secret training, traveling to Kyoto and stumbling upon the character named Anji, the fallen monk, that you learn at the end of this episode is actually part of Shishio's group of warriors, translated as the Ten Swords, or also known in the Japanese as the Jupon Gatana. So I once again have to say that I think this episode was magnificently done, and I do think that this was better than the 90s version, other than just preferring the general art style of 90s anime. Everything else in this episode, I think, was done better than it was in the 90s anime. And they also added a few extra scenes between Sanosuke and Anji, which I particularly liked. They were the scenes where they were sitting around the fire, sharing a meal after every night of training. I do believe in the 90s anime, it's just Sanosuke training for the 7 days, and sometimes Anji comes out to kind of like check on him, but I don't think they do any more scenes where they're talking around the fire. So all of that was new and added. But we're accomplishing a couple of things in this episode that I really enjoy. I love splitting the characters apart. Like I said, that's one of my favorite things in storytelling. I don't know why I enjoy it so much, but I love when you take a group of established characters that are always together and then they have to all go their separate ways and then eventually all kind of culminate again at a later date after they've gone through particular journeys and learn things and, you know, become different people before they meet up again. And that's essentially what's happening here. We saw where Kenshin was, how he was traveling. He met Misao, who was part of the Oniwaban. They did all the stuff that happened in Shingetsu Village. And now we're cutting over to Sanosuke, who is lost in the forest. He doesn't know where he is. He's like, what the hell is going on? And then all of a sudden he stumbles upon this character named Anji, who we learn is a fallen monk. And he has a very specific, particular ability where he is able to just seemingly pulverize objects. He takes out his little sword, you know, he shoves it in the ground. This ripple effect goes through the ground and these statues explode. And Sanosuke thinks that it's this technique, I forget what it's called, but something where you kind of call upon the powers of Buddha, something a little bit more spiritual, supernatural. And Anji's like, actually, that's not it. And even if I wanted it to be, I couldn't use it because I have renounced my teachings. So this is a guy that still wants to bring salvation to the world, but he no longer believes in the teachings of Buddha. And he alludes to something called the Buddhist hunt that happened, but Sanosuke has no idea what it is. And so Anji doesn't go into the explanation. You will definitely learn things about this character, a little bit more about his backstory later on. But as of right now, what we can gather just from this episode is that this is a very strong-willed person that put in 10 years of training. You know that he's renounced the teachings of Buddha, and they specifically mention ways to do that are through fornication or through murder. And I'm not saying that Anji's never gotten laid, but I think that you can infer from this episode that it's probably the other reason. So his hands have probably been stained with some blood. And again, we'll get into more of that as the series goes on. But he talks about the technique of the mastery of two layers, where the essential idea behind it, and this is what I really like, And this is the kind of stuff I love in series like Baki the Grappler also, where they explain these concepts in such specific details that it feels like it could really happen. You know, part of the reason I love Baki is because it'll take actual martial arts ideas that are true, but then just exaggerate them to epic proportions. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here too, where we're talking about like the physics of objects having a natural resistance to things, because the idea behind the attack is that you hit with these knuckles first to break the resistance and then follow through with the actual punch that will bring all of that force forward instead of some of the force being disregarded because it's battling the resistance of the object, right? Like it feels like it's something you could actually do, which is why when I was like 12, 13, 14 years old, I would sit in the backyard, gather rocks, and try to do this over and over. It never worked. Anji would have killed me. But Sanosuke asked to learn to do it or to train in order to be able to accomplish it. And Anji asks him some questions. He asks him, you know, why he wants to learn this ability. And Sanosuke says, so I can get stronger. And then he asks him what he feels about the government. And just a little piece of advice for anybody out there. If you ever meet a strange, like 6'2" bodybuilder, jacked, fallen monk in the middle of the forest and no one's around, and he asks you what you think about the government, please, dear God, say that you hate the government. I mean, in Sanosuke's case, it was true, but this is just general life advice to keep you, you know, doing well. Like, just say you hate the government. And according to Anji, it took him 1 month to learn the attack, or learn the method of the mastery of 2 layers. And Sanosuke claims that he will be able to do it in 1 week. And so we get the kind of montage of him training. Like I said, the anime adds those extra scenes of him and Anji sitting around the fire, which I really like. And I also really love the moment where he sees the image of Captain Sagara telling him, you know, it's okay to stop. And Sanosuke says he has to not listen to the order. He has to do this. And it's not just the arrogance of, I need to become stronger. You know, it is to help Kenshin. It is to help on this journey. It is to help when he gets to Kyoto. Because of what happened with him and Saito, and the way that Saito says, you know, you're just not up to par, you're not up to our level, you're going to be a burden to Kenshin if you go. All of these things have been sitting with him and stewing. And Sanosuke, he's not a weak guy. Like, he's incredibly strong. He's resilient as hell. You know, he's not a swordsman. I love the bit of dialogue where Anji's like, why don't you just get a gun? You know? And I love, you know, Sanosuke grew up on the streets, man. Like, he's a street fighter. Like, he's like, listen, I'm not a swordsman. And if I start now, I'll never, you know, be able to catch up to them. I fight with my fists, and a gun is too, you know, it's not my style. It's too easy. Like, I need to be able to do this myself with my own bare hands. And I respect that about him. And he does eventually end up being able to do it. I mean, of course he does, right? And so him and Anji go their separate ways. And of course, the kind of fun resonance of this scene is that he particularly got lost in this area of the forest that he learns is the exact same area where the Sekio army, where his master, you know, where the hallucination of his master that he saw was killed along with everybody else. And so the fact that he would end up being lost there as opposed to anywhere else is just a little bit of irony that I really enjoy. And then, of course, the ending of the episode, you see Sojiro show up and say, hey, Anji, Shishio is gathering all of the Jupangatana, so we got to go to Kyoto. And then you realize this entire time that Sanosuke has been hanging out with and being trained by a member of Shishio's elite fighting force. And yeah, that will definitely come back into play later. Don't you worry. So yeah, really great episode. I thought this was a great interpretation of this part of the story. I love Sanosuke, you know, getting frustrated by it. And it just brings back a lot of good nostalgic memories for me, because watching that original 90s anime, I'm not kidding you guys. Like, I must have like punched 100 rocks in my lifetime or more trying to learn the mastery of 2 layers. And you know what? This episode inspired me to try to do it again. So I'm going to end this review and go outside and punch some rocks. Let me know what you guys thought about this episode down below. Thanks for watching, guys. I do appreciate it. Shout out to all my Kenshin fans out there. Shout out to everybody that sent in a super thanks, super chat on the last video and the last few videos. It really does help me out. It helps these videos be more worth it, because yeah, well, you guys know. So I just really appreciate it, and it means a lot to me, man. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next week with the next episode, where I do believe we will finally get to Kyoto.